It starts and ends with clay. I started making pottery on the wheel in 1971, the year I graduated from high school, when I hung out in the art room, although I wasn't taking an art class. And a friend of mine named John Michael said, "Here, try making a pot on this potter's wheel." And with a little bit of instruction, I tried it and I got a result. A lot of people get results like this when you first try it, and I often show this to people saying it's not where you start but where you end up. I had enough sense at the time that I needed to foot it, and I signed it with somebody else's initials because I wasn't all that proud of it. Anyway, I made 3 or 4 more pots in high school, and when I went to college, St. Olaf College in Minnesota, they had a pottery studio as part of the art building, but no teacher to teach it. But the students were kind of running their own, the blind leading the blind, I guess you'd say. And so I started making pots in my spare time there, and eventually decided I'd be an art major concentrating on pottery. My major professor was named Mac Gimsey, and he had done some pottery as part of his sculptural work. And by the time I was a senior, I was sort of running the studio, ordering the materials, and mixing up all the clay and stuff like that, the glazes for everybody. But when I graduated with a BA in art, I didn't feel ready to take on actually being a potter. And I think back, I would guess I might have made 60 or so pots through my college career, which isn't a whole lot considering I make 60 to 100 a day now. So anyway, I had known of a couple of potters that were 4 years ahead of me, I guess, graduated from the same college, or at least Chris Holmquist did. He'd gone and studied in Japan, or worked in Japan in a folk pottery place where they had all the wheels hooked up to pulleys, fan belts sort of thing, so that you could either go full speed or off. And he worked there for a year and developed the feeling for the Japanese style of production pottery. And I realized in my college career I didn't want to be an art potter, I wanted to be a craft potter, one who makes functional ware and to sort of develop lines. But in order to get there, I asked if I could apprentice with them, which I did sort of for 2 years, and I realized in retrospect I wasn't much of, I did mix their clay and their glazes, things like that, but you know, it was a great gift that I got from Chris and Steve Guntner. Steve had studied in Norway for a year, so he brought some of his own flavor to the Fox Lake pottery that they had started. After the 2 years, I went on and got married and moved to Denison, Minnesota, where we tried starting up a small pottery with Kirby Lewis, and we learned how little you could live on, and it didn't have much choice in the matter. At that time, pottery sales would be like a couple thousand a year, I think, something. When I look back at my pottery records, I can only find them back to 1981, when I was well under 8,000 a year, and it stayed pretty steadily at that for about a decade. So it was a hard way to make a living, being married, starting to have children. We moved west and lived first in Portland, where we tried to make pottery in the basement of a house there and didn't have any good outlets to sell it. We moved from there to Chelan, Washington, where we lived in the country 20 miles up the road from Chelan, Washington, along Lake Chelan. And again, sales were hard to come by. After 2 years there, we moved in 1981 to Spirit Lake, Idaho, a place we found because my wife's father was going here for some medical work. We thought this place at least we could afford, because at that time Spirit Lake, about half the town was for sale, and it had been down in the dumps The history of Spirit Lake is a long and interesting one, but a different story than my own pottery work. But we did settle in on Main Street in Spirit Lake in 1981, and we've been there ever since. So anyway, let's see. Enough talk for a while. I said it began and ends with clay. Right now, I am out of clay, which is why I'm having time to reflect. Because of COVID or whatever, the supplier I've used for 45 years has been having some troubles, and I'm looking for new sources of clay, and I've ordered some, and I'm out of clay except for a bit of scrap clay. So we'll see how this throws just to end this segment. Again, I went from 60 in probably 4 years to 60 a day. And as I mentioned, it's scrap clay, it's got bubbles in it, it's got lumps in it. But when you've thrown over 100, maybe 150,000 pots, you can throw about anything. Whether you want to keep it is another matter if it's got too many bubbles and lumps. Not going to keep this one. When we moved into Spirit Lake in 1981, this front room of our 3-room house was our showroom, as well as where we had to sleep at night. So we decided to add a kiosk out in front, which is now gone and replaced by a much larger kiosk, which we've kept adding on to. And that's where our outdoor sales started. This is the kiln room with 2 7-foot electric kilns. One of them is cooling, one of them is firing, and that tends to be the way it is every day. Up above the kilns, I have room to store a lot of pots to get them dried out for the firing. This is the packing room with room to store some pottery for sale. Room to do something like gluing magnets, and to wrap pots and store bags and things for selling them, boxes for shipping, and cat food for the cats. From the time that I read Small is Beautiful by E.F. Schumacher in college, I wanted to have a small studio, and I certainly have managed that. This is larger than I started in, but this is the glazing area of my pottery. This is the ware storage area. And here's the wheel and throwing area. And over here, if I had any clay, it would be stored and wedged, and other area for storage of glazed materials.